All right, good morning. My name's Stephen Baker. Welcome to Shaco's panel on financial services and mobile solutions. I want to thank everybody for coming out early, being online early. Got coffee and donuts, and we're going to talk about mobile technology. So, great way to start a Tuesday, right?
So financial services or financial institutions are usually the first ones of trying to figure out how to prevent an attack, right? Seeing changes from what you say basics now might be a completely different situation 2 years ago. Basics beforehand was how do we make sure an application is the communication between the application to the institution's network, the data is transmitted securely. So you start with SSL or some sort of encryption that banks are usually known for, so creating their own encryptions. But that was basic back then. Still, if you don't do the basic right now, you might be in trouble. But now start getting into creating some of that security, not just for their data, but the consumers in mind. How do we make that easier for them to know if my information that I'm entering this application is secure enough, if the data I'm sending back to them is secure enough? Consumers don't know. They don't have a clue how that works. But what we try to do basically in terms of advanced security, we're talking to different cases. What's security for the company that we're working with, and what's security for the consumer, and provide the best experience for the consumer is usually the first thing we look into that. Advanced security right now, we'll be talking, two-factor authentication. You enter your password and then you sends a text message back to you with a code, and you enter that code, and that makes some security involved into that. And then, while we're working more into newer devices, the Samsungs and the iPhone X with, biosecurity, which is fingerprint, iris scan with the Samsung devices, or face recognition. So that for the consumer is a better way to say, yeah, that's, I don't have to remember a password. I don't have to do any of this. My entering my information here is secure. So I don't know, depends on where you're talking. The advanced security might be a different case, but to us, we're looking in both cases. What's secure for the company? What's a good experience for the consumers?
What experiences are you seeing associates at Capital One looking to mobile for?
So I think there's a couple different buckets, right? We really look at kind of the enterprise, and we really look at the associates, right? In terms of what kind of solutions can we provide them that's impactful. We look at the enterprise. Capital One, we tout that we're a tech company now, right? And we're going through that evolution. And what better way to do that as your first day at Capital One, your experience onboarding is digital. We just started to launch that experience. So now when you walk in, you're not greeted with a bunch of paper. You're greeted with an iPad. You get to log in, and everything you're doing is completely digital. Then you kind of look at the associate perspective. Things that we do today, some of our leaders do podcasts, and the only way you can actually consume those is if you're on network. And today what we do now is we create a podcast app that really lets them connect to those things on the go. So as we continue to look at that and get demand signals from our associates, really continuing to give those experience to them, that really is impactful.
Mm-hmm. Consumer financial apps are obviously exploding. Online banking, robo-advisors, savings, it's everywhere. So as an investor, how do you find what's going to really connect with consumers and what's going to be that next thing that they adopt?
And it's one I think every investor struggles with, but also I'd say consumer. So if you're looking for ease of use, utility, what's going to be your go-to app for mobile banking and savings and ultimately investing? For instance, pictures. You might have Instagram as your go-to app. Well, there's such an array of apps right now in the fintech space for consumers. We try to look at where is that wedge that gets into the millennials' wallet. And the reason I stress the millennial consumer base is that is the largest base that's going to be using this. So it's prudent for us to consider that. But what's that app that creates the wedge into their daily habits, into their daily use? Is it going to be an app that syncs with their day-to-day, transactions from their checking and savings, or really checking? Is the wedge going to be a new type of credit card that they're using with new rewards? Is it going to be a robo-advisor? Is that going to be the hook in? So we try to figure out where you start to see these trend lines. So, I would say, and even as a consumer, what do you use most often in a day when it comes to finance? Probably your debit card or your credit card. So, and even there's differences in how you use a debit card and a credit card. So when you think of an app associating with those, to me, that's a one obvious wedge that you would want to focus on. So if there's a platform and a new app out there that makes that easier and more ubiquitous for millennials to use, then that is one that I think I'd favor over, say, a robo-advisor right now. Robo-advisor might well be the wedge for a different customer set. So then we get back to who's your customer. So I think that it's kind of a circular thought process, but it is a rapidly growing segment, and it's a very competitive landscape. So that same wedge, as I just said, could be different shades of gray. So it's I don't know if I have a direct answer, but there's those considerations, and really you start to see too where a lot of these, for instance, a neobank platform where you have basically an online bank. Who are their back-end partners? Because that can also drive how they're focusing. So you might have an effort with Northwestern Mutual. Well, Northwestern Mutual's, their wedge into somebody's financial kind of life is primarily insurance, and then they expand out from that. Capital One started with credit cards, and I'd say they're still, what's in your wallet? It's that credit card, and then you expand out from that. Traditional banks, it's your checking and savings, and you expand out from that. So really, who are they kind of working with, and what are the channel partners? So.
Well, if you think about it, a mobile app is essentially a self-service tool. So that means any customer can pick up the app, download it, and use it right away without assistance or help from anyone. So that in itself is a really big UX and UI challenge, especially for the financial space, because banking can be extremely complex for the average customer. I know for me, I'm not a financial expert, so things like that are what I try to keep in mind. I noticed though with the financial space, it's good to keep in mind clarity, ease of use, of course, utility, like we talked about before. Like I mentioned before, by providing a range of services that ultimately empower the customer to have that control of their accounts, and to even go beyond just giving them control. If you help them set up goals and reach their goals, if you help them change their behaviors and in a positive way that impacts them, if you provide tools like that that help them get there, so budgeting or giving them alerts whenever there's real-time updates on their accounts, things like that, I think are great to consider. Along the lines of clarity, you can often see in the financial space like jargon-heavy content. It's easy to use terms that are frequently and well-known used in the financial space, but a consumer who is not a financial expert like myself, they might not know what some of these terms or words mean. So things like APR, you could instead say interest rate, or payee, you could say recipient. Also, on my USAA app, there is a branded registered trademark name to access mobile deposits, and it would just be much easier for any consumer if the menu said mobile deposits instead of saying that branded name. So along the lines of clarity, you can often see that within the financial space, and that's something to avoid. I've actually written a blog that goes over several simple and easy tips for the financial industry. So if anyone's interested, it's on Shaka's website, and it goes into more detail.
we're seeing continued growth and partnerships from just, from the community, right? External and internal. And where I really see the value in that, it really allows, businesses really to kind of target into their audiences, right? Because we can't solve every use case ourselves. So really reaching out to these, these developers and things in the community really kind of builds those experiences. So then they can take whatever they're doing with those APIs and build it into whatever their solution is that really is targeted for their audience.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's been a pretty big win for us as we continue to develop those experiences.
Right. Yeah. In terms of open APIs, well, definitely when we're working with different institutions like Capital One back then, when we helped creating a few of the applications, it was really key for us to have a good place or a central place for getting the data. More so in institutions like Capital One, security is really important, so we wanted to make sure the access to the data was easy for us to access and as well securely. So when we're working from this office or we're working at their location, it was a key component for us to understand how everything was created and what actual information can we gather from specific APIs. Outside of the institutions like Capital One, we're talking with third-party applications, like we're talking about the Facebooks, the Instagrams, all of that. They have APIs that you can access that will help us also creating the interfaces or the experiences for our clients. Completely different world, right? There's security involved, there's still privacy involved, but as a developers with the problem of Facebook, you have access to all this data. It's your responsibility to make sure that information is basically, it's like it's protected as is your own information. In most of these cases, open APIs are not specifically saying, use it and make sure you use it right. It's just here it is, just use the data, whatever you want, do whatever you want with it. So two different worlds, but it's really, it's if there's no APIs, either open or closed APIs, there's no mobile applications there, nowhere.
Where do you see disruptors happening in mobile and financial space?
Everybody looks this way. Yeah, my life seems like I try to read a crystal ball. I don't have the answer, but I'll take a stab at what I think personally will work. I do think it's going to be on the consumer side. Which platforms / apps control the millennial financial well-being? And regardless of how that wedge is in, to what extent can you really capture the millennials' financial goals and accurately or efficiently help them manage their financial health? Because that then, of course, flows over into the enterprise side. So I do think number one, it is going to be a mobile. I mean, we're mobile first. This world has quickly become mobile first. The APIs piece that feeds into what's the big disruptor, that to me it's going to be interesting, and y'all would know much better than I would if I'm just way off base in asserting this. But if you look at the healthcare industry and you look at some of the big players in the electronic medical records, they have open APIs, but they have limited open APIs, if that makes sense. So you have like this new kind of layer, this new middleman of sorts that controls the API flow. So it'll be interesting to see, right, with the financial industry, to what extent will regulations start to, I'd say they're probably lagging now in terms of how they're keeping pace with the technology changes. So where will regulations respond versus be proactive? So again, that's a really vague answer, but it's a crystal ball. So
to pile onto that, I think it's really staying close to the trend, right? And the folks, your millennials and your new generation, like what are they most connected with? So because that's how you want to reach them, right? Create those connected experiences from your mobile to sometimes even like when you look at Siri or Alexa, like how can you create those digital experiences, right, where it extends just beyond just how they deal with money and how they connect to their well-beings and their investments and things like that. So the easier you can make it for your consumer, I think that's really where the trend is. So.
And make it social too, right? I mean, so people aren't getting their financial advice from advisors as much as from their network.
Family, friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Increasingly on
And
social
caveat
channels.
to all this, I'm talking about rising trends in terms of, population growth. I mean, there's a ton of wealth trapped in and money trapped obviously in or contained in the accounts of, the non-millennial generations. So I'm not excluding that as a focus area, but that's the headlines right now. The sexiest headlines are the ones with, how do you get the millennials? So, and I'm, and then you got people like me who's trapped in between. We don't even know what generation we're supposed to be called. So we just wander around like the Apple Circle.
So just to add into the disruptors and financial industry, not just any financial industry, but every industry right now, it's more into new technologies. We're talking about artificial intelligence. All of that is going to play a lot of behind the scenes of how you connect to your consumers. So all the information that you're going to be getting from your application, from the TV, from your Alexa, it's going to be controlled or curated via some sort of machine that's going to understand what you as a target consumer you need. So the information you're going to get is because of that, some of that, and that's going to disrupt a lot more of the industries, not just in financial. So that's my take on what I see things are going to move or change.